The 22nd of June, 1941. Under the codename Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invades the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. Among the first territories to be occupied by Nazi forces is Lithuania, one of the 3 Baltic states that Stalin brutally annexed in the summer of 1940. By the time of the German invasion, 10% of Lithuania's 2.5 million population is Jewish, and the Nazis, assisted by local collaborators, quickly implement their plan to exterminate the Jewish community. They deprive Jews of their basic human rights, forcing them into ghettos where they face extreme overcrowding, severe food shortages, and starvation. In the weeks that follow, Jews are beaten, tortured, and subjected to mass executions by the Nazis, who force their victims to undress before being shot and buried in mass graves. By the time Lithuania is liberated by the Red Army in the summer of 1944, more than 90% of the Jewish population is wiped out. One of the worst atrocities against the Jews on the territory of Lithuania takes place between the 25th and 29th of June 1941 in the country's second-largest city, when thousands of Jewish men, women, and children are murdered in what becomes known as the Kaunas Pogrom. Ever since Adolf Hitler took power in Germany on the 30th of January 1933, his aggressive policies and territorial expansion set the stage for war. Hitler sought to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild Germany's strength, and establish dominance in Europe. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. In May 1940, the German army launched a rapid invasion of France, bypassing its defenses through Belgium. Paris fell within 6 weeks, and by June, much of Western Europe was under Nazi control. Meanwhile, in the skies over Britain, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, began the Battle of Britain, a campaign to weaken British resistance through relentless air raids. German bombers targeted cities like London, Coventry, and Birmingham. But Britain's Royal Air Force held firm, marking Germany's first significant defeat. After the invasion of the Soviet Union began in June 1941, Nazi forces occupied Lithuania. It took the Wehrmacht, the German armed forces, only about a week to conquer the whole country. As the German army advanced, the Einsatzgruppen, Nazi mobile death squads, were tasked with eliminating individuals considered enemies of the Third Reich, including Jews, Roma people, suspected communists, Soviet officials, and partisans. As the occupation took hold, the country's vibrant Jewish community, deeply rooted in Lithuania's cultural and political life, was suddenly placed in grave danger. The Jews of Lithuania had a rich and distinct culture, characterized by a unique dialect of the Yiddish language. Lithuanian Jews were influential in various Jewish ideologies, including the Jewish workers' movement, Zionism, and rational religious thought. Before the Second World War, the Jewish population in Lithuania was around 160,000, making up about 7% of the total population. By 1941, the Jewish population in Lithuania had grown to about 250,000, or 10% of the population, due to an influx of refugees from German-occupied Poland. However, the relative safety they had found in Lithuania was short-lived. Following the Soviet occupation of Lithuania in June 1940, thousands of Lithuanians were arrested, deported to Siberia, or executed as part of a broader campaign to eliminate resistance and impose Soviet rule. Property was confiscated, institutions were dismantled, and entire communities lived in fear under the new regime. In this atmosphere of repression, some Lithuanians came to believe that local Jews were complicit, as a number of them had taken up roles in the Soviet administration or were seen as welcoming to the occupation. Although most Lithuanian Jews had no influence over Soviet policy, the association took root and was later reinforced by Nazi propaganda, which portrayed Jews as collaborators. When the Germans invaded a year later, this resentment helped trigger brutal acts of violence, which were quickly organized and intensified following the arrival of German occupation forces, including the SS and Einsatzgruppen. Einsatzgruppe A, under the command of Franz Walter Stahlecker, was assigned to the Baltic region, including Lithuania, and followed closely behind the advancing Wehrmacht. Meanwhile, the Lithuanian Activist Front, a far-right underground organization operating inside Soviet-occupied Lithuania, took control of Kaunas, the second-largest city in central Lithuania, and much of the surrounding countryside on the evening of the 23rd of June, 1941. 2 days later, on the morning of the 25th of June, Stahlecker arrived in Kaunas. In this city, which was also known as Kovno, he visited the headquarters of the Lithuanian Security Police and delivered a lengthy anti-Semitic speech, encouraging Lithuanians to take the initiative in solving the so-called Jewish problem. However, according to Stahlecker's own report from the 15th of October, the local population was initially reluctant to begin violent actions. In response, he turned to Algirdas Klimaitis, a Lithuanian paramilitary leader who'd been trained by the SD, the intelligence agency of the SS and the Nazi Party. Because Klimaitis commanded a separate force of roughly 600 men, organized in the city of Tilsit, and operating independently from the Lithuanian activist front, he was seen as more reliable and directly aligned with German interests. At Stahlecker's request, Klimaitis and his men initiated the first pogroms in Kaunas. These actions were carried out under the supervision of Karl Jäger, head of Einsatzkommando III. Starting on the 25th of June 1941, Klimaitis' men launched a series of brutal attacks on the Jewish population of Kaunas, focusing in particular on the suburb of Slobodka, located on the northern bank of the Neris River. This district, also known as Viljampolė, was home to a large and vibrant Jewish community, including the world-renowned Slobodka yeshiva, a center of Jewish religious learning. According to Rabbi Ephraim Oshry, German soldiers were seen standing guard on the bridge leading into Slobodka, but the killings themselves were carried out by Lithuanian volunteers. One of the most gruesome incidents involved the rabbi of Slobodka, Rav Zalman Osovsky. He was tied hand and foot to a chair, his head placed on an open volume of the Talmud, a sacred Jewish book, and then sawed off while his wife and son were murdered shortly afterwards. His severed head was placed in a window with a sign that read, "This is what we'll do to all the Jews." Over the following days, more than 1,000 Jews were murdered in one of the first major pogroms to occur in Nazi-occupied Lithuania. The most infamous atrocity occurred during what became known as the Lietūkis Garage Massacre. On the afternoon of the 27th of June, 68 Jewish civilians were gathered at a garage courtyard at 43 Vytauto Avenue in central Kaunas. The German military had not yet formally established full control over the city, allowing local collaborators to act without oversight. A large crowd gathered to watch, including men, women, and children. The victims were humiliated and tortured before being killed. They were beaten with shovels, iron bars, and high-pressure water hoses. In one instance, Jews were forced to place the nozzle of a hose into their mouths, and the water was turned on full force until they collapsed or died. Those who refused were beaten to death, and if a victim regained consciousness after fainting, they were killed on the spot. The courtyard became soaked with blood, which was washed away by the same hose as the executions continued. Lithuanian children were lifted onto the shoulders of their parents to catch a glimpse of the death dealer of Kovno, a sight that Colonel L. von Bischofshausen, a German army officer, later described as the most frightful event he had witnessed during 2 world wars. He recalled, "On the concrete forecourt of the petrol station, a blond man of medium height, aged about 25, stood leaning on a wooden club, resting. The club was as thick as his arm and came up to his chest. At his feet lay about 15 to 20 dead or dying people. Water flowed continuously from a hose, washing blood away into the drainage gully. Just a few steps behind him, some 20 men guarded by armed civilians stood waiting for their cruel execution in silent submission. In response to a cursory wave, the next man stepped forward silently and was beaten to death with the wooden club in the most bestial manner, each blow accompanied by enthusiastic shouts from the audience. After killing around 50 people, the death dealer picked up an accordion, climbed onto the pile of bodies, and began playing the Lithuanian national anthem. According to Stahlecker's report on the 28th of June 1941, around 3,800 Jews had been killed in Kaunas and another 1,200 in nearby towns. Karl Jäger, the head of Einsatzkommando III, later documented that between the 24th of June and the 6th of July, Approximately 7,800 Jews, including men, women, children, and the elderly, were murdered in Kaunas. Of those, 4,000 were reportedly killed by Lithuanian collaborators alone without direct German involvement. These early massacres marked the beginning of the Holocaust in Lithuania and served as a grim preview of the mass extermination that was to follow. Though many of those responsible for the Kaunas pogroms and the massacres in Lithuania never faced trial, in some cases, justice, or even revenge, eventually caught up with the perpetrators. Franz Walter Stahlecker, the commander of Einsatzgruppe A, who oversaw the killings in the Baltic region, was fatally wounded by Soviet partisans near Leningrad in March 1942. Karl Jäger, the head of the mobile killing squad that carried out mass shootings across Lithuania, was arrested in West Germany after the war, and to avoid spending the rest of his life behind bars, he committed suicide in prison in June 1959 while awaiting trial for his crimes. The identity of the so-called death dealer of Kovno remains a subject of debate. Some believed he was Joachim Hamann, a German SS officer who led the notorious Rollkommando Hamann, responsible for the mass murder of tens of thousands of Jews in Lithuania. However, Lithuanian historian Arvydas Anušauskas later identified the man as Juozas Surmas, a Lithuanian collaborator. According to Holocaust survivor and chronicler Alex Feitelson, the death dealer survived the war and eventually made his way to the United States, where he published a book titled The Partisans, glorifying anti-Soviet resistance fighters in the Baltic forests. He was later equipped with money, forged identity papers and a radio transmitter, and parachuted back into Soviet-occupied Lithuania to help organize anti-Soviet underground operations. He was reportedly killed during one of these missions. During the 3 years of Nazi occupation, almost 200,000 Jews in Lithuania were murdered, and only a few thousand survived the war. Over 90% of Lithuania's Jewish population was exterminated during this period, making it one of the most complete and devastating destructions of a Jewish community in any country affected by the Holocaust. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.